Doesn't matter, Deborah, we're recording. Hi, everybody, and welcome to this edition of Macro Pro and Friends. We have a special edition of Macro Pro and Friends as we are pairing with the EWC. My twin sister, Deborah, is my cohort today. Deborah, how are you?
I'm fabulous. Thank you for doing this, Diane. I did not know everything that's involved making this happen, and you're a master at it. So thank you.
Well, you're quite welcome. It is a fun thing to do. I know we're also, speaking of fun, getting ready for your Game On conference. Can you tell us when it is and where it's at?
Yes. Okay. So EWC has an annual conference that takes place in Anaheim, California on April the 4th, and we have phenomenal speakers that we have lined up this year, and our theme is Game On. So there's going to be a lot of fun in the solution room, and we call it a solution room instead of exhibit hall, because the truth is all those people who exhibit and they sponsor, these are people who can help you with the problems that you have, and we encourage everybody to go visit them and talk to the people who can help them with their problems. But if the people who are here today, if you would like to join us, please do, and you can go to the website at www.ewcconference.com, and that will give you all the information about the conference. Click on the conference, go down to workers' comp and risk managers, type in the promo code EWC and get $100 off.
Excellent. Well, that's a very nice gift for coming to today's webinar. So before we get started with our webinar, we have a really great one planned for you. I want to tell you just a little things. Today, your class is worth 1 CEU. So you can expect that in 1 hour. Make sure that you download your certificate when you get it. I can help you for the first 30 days, but after that, I can't help you. So make sure you download that today. You need to be logged on to the GoToWebinar platform. So you have to be watching it on you got to be able to see us and the presentation in order to get your certificate. And that, again, certificate will arrive within an hour. Handouts are available to you in the control panel, so make sure that you download those so you can refer to them in the future. And then we have a question box there that if you have any questions, you certainly can ask any questions in there. And at the end of the presentation, Bridget and Danny will answer any questions they can. If we can't get to all the questions, no problem. I'll make sure that they get your questions so they can reply back to you directly. And then you can watch this again if you would like on the Macro Pro YouTube channel. So Bridget and Danny, why don't you come on board? And in the background, we have Shannon, and Shannon's going to be doing all the behind the works for the company. So can you tell everybody what we're going to be talking about today? And the floor is yours.
Thank you. We're excited to be here. Danny and I are looking forward to being with you for the next 60 minutes and talking about Section 111 and the reporting penalties that are finally here. And Danny, why don't you let everybody know a little bit about yourself?
Okay, my name is Danny Thorn. I'm the Vice President of Claims on the Pacific region for Benchmark Administrators. And that's about, well, I've been in the claim business. It's my 4th career, actually. I've been in the claim business since 2005. And my original career was in the hotel industry. I worked for Marriott. So that's where I am. Glad to be here with you.
Thanks, Danny. And I'm Bridget Smith. I'm the Senior Vice President for IMPAX, and we are a Medicare compliance partner. I'm also an attorney. And before I got into this crazy world of Medicare compliance, I used to practice defense work in workers' comp and general liability. And so we're looking forward to talking to you today about civil monetary penalties. And if you have questions, as Diane said, just put those in the box and we'll get to those as we conclude the presentation. And if there are questions that we are not able to get to, we'll respond in writing to you as well. So we're going to start with just our agenda. And today we're going to talk about penalties, but we're also going to talk about reporting in general, because we don't want to just say these are the penalties and here's the final rule. We want to give you some insight on reporting as well, and how reporting can really impact not only financial penalties, but other areas. And Danny has a really interesting story he's going to talk about that kind of brings that all home as well. So let's start with just a little bit of background. So with respect to Section 111 reporting, the real purpose of Section 111 reporting is for CMS, for Medicare, to collect data on your claim so that they can determine if you're responsible for payment of medical for that particular Medicare beneficiary, or if they're responsible for medical. So it's separate and apart from conditional payments and Medicare set-asides. Even though it impacts conditional payments, it's that reporting requirement that says, listen, we want to know about you because we want to know what our exposure is and what your exposure is. And that's really what it is in a nutshell. And there's a user guide out there that explains all the technical requirements for reporting. And we've been at this a while, but there's still a lot of confusion regarding reporting and Section 111. And Danny, when it comes to civil monetary penalties and Section 111 reporting, what are some of your concerns or thoughts about it?
Well, that's a loaded question. Everybody in the claim world knows when you say the word penalty, that's a bad thing. Either we've missed a benefit payment, a timely payment, or we've let a medical payment go too long, and so we have to assess penalties and pay penalties. But I have never, in the time I've been in this business, seen a significant penalty structure such as Section 111. Now, and Bridget and I were talking about this before. I made a comment. She says, "Well, I can't say that," and I said, well, "I can." And here's the line on this: CMS is looking for any opportunity they can to defer their costs, to defer payments to another entity. And this is one of those opportunities that they have found, and quite rightly so, to assess penalties to insurance companies that have paid out on medical and perhaps not coded it correctly. And I'll defer my stories for a little bit. But when you look at the scope of the penalties associated with Section 111, they are significant.
Yeah.
Significant enough that they could put an insurance company out of business very quickly if they felt like it was egregious and that the lack of reporting was not up to their standards. And that's a bold statement, but it's significant. If those of you who are on this call have not seen the penalties, they're millions of dollars per day for non-compliance.
Well, and CMS put a cap on it, but they did include inflation in that, and it depends. And there's a tier, and we're going to talk about it. But you're right, Danny. They really are significant, and you know, they go up to you know, $1,000 a day per day plus inflation, and so it's depending on how late you are. And we're gonna delve into that. But I think you hit the nail on the head that insurers and self-insureds, they're really concerned about the financial impact of these penalties, right? And you might get audited, you may not get audited, but that audit, if you do get audited, it might not occur the first year. It could occur the third year or the seventh year. I say it's like the Hunger Games, right? You know, you don't know when you're going to be picked as a tribute. So I love having Danny on here because he provides the real perspective of the day-to-day of what insurers are facing and what self-insureds are facing as well, and that is a big concern. So,
and Bridget, it's not $1,000 a day for a book of claims. It's $1,000 a day per claim.
Right, per claim. That's exactly right. Per claim. And so that's the scary part of it. And so it's not chump change. Now I will say that CMS has said that the goal of the penalties are not to to have a windfall for them. And they really believe that a lot of people are doing the reporting and trying their best to do it. It's for the people that aren't, but the penalties themselves could have been much worse. We saw the proposed rules, and they were a lot different than we got in the final rule. But obviously there is a significant financial impact for RRE. So with respect to reporting and what it is, because we have to understand this in the context of what it is. So reporting really only is a couple of areas, right? And this checklist, I would recommend you guys looking at, referring to, because I think we get overwhelmed by Section 111. Like, oh, there's so many components to it. Well, actually, there's only a few. There's a lot of information you provide, but there's only a few components. And so the first is that you have to be somebody who has to report. And sometimes that's not so easy to figure out if you have to be the one reporting. But if you're an insurer, your liability, workers' comp, no fault, self-insured, if you are that type of entity, then you're reporting to CMS, right? It's not your vendor who's the RRE, it's not your TPA who's the RRE, it is you, the insurer, you, the self-insured, you, the workers' compensation insurer, you, the liability insurer, you, the no-fault insurer. And if you're an RRE, you have an obligation to report, but you don't report on every claim, right? You're only reporting on those claims that involve Medicare beneficiaries. And here's the reason, is because CMS won't pay for anybody who's not a Medicare beneficiary. They won't pay medical for anybody else. So they don't care if you settle a claim with 1 million people that aren't Medicare beneficiary. If you settle one claim with a Medicare beneficiary, they want to know about it, and every other claim that you settle with a Medicare beneficiary. Because
Bridget, can I step in here for a second?
Absolutely.
So if you're a Medicare beneficiary, then they want to know. But if you're 10 years from being a Medicare beneficiary and you have a claim and you have body parts that were injured in that claim, they want to know. They're going to want to know 10 years from now, so that if, for instance, it's a knee injury and you're submitting to Medicare care for your knee, and you have either an open future medical claim, or you're residing in a state where it's a lifetime medical situation on a work comp claim, then they want to know, and the reporting comes from the input that's been made into that claim during the time of its claim life.
Yeah,
and so yeah. Go ahead, Bridget, sorry.
Oh, no, I was going to say that's a great point, Danny, because even if someone is not Medicare eligible now and you don't have to report on that claim, if they become Medicare eligible and you have open medical, like a lifetime state, right, then you are reporting on it. So what you did before that individual became Medicare eligible is really important in when you start reporting it. And so I think that's a great point. And the way that you tell if someone's a Medicare beneficiary, Medicare said, we're going to give you a tool, and that tool is the query. So Medicare says, okay, query comes back and it tells you if you're a Medicare beneficiary. So right now, we know in our conversation so far, you only have to report if you are an RRE, and you only have to report on Medicare beneficiaries. But you also have to have something to report. You don't just report just because of that, right? You have to have you have to report if there's something that happens that makes you responsible for the claim. So that's going to be either if you've accepted medical, which CMS calls ongoing responsibility for medical, which we see in workers' comp and no fault, right? Or if you've settled the case, right? So unless one of those two things happen, and it's not just the case, it's the medical portion of the case, unless one of those two things happen, you're not reporting on that claim. So let's say you have a Medicare beneficiary, you've denied the claim, you're not reporting anything, right? You have a Medicare beneficiary, You've accepted the claim, you're reporting ORM. Let's say you have a Medicare beneficiary, it's a denied claim and you settle it, you're reporting TPOC. So those are the only obligations. Now we wanted to give this framework before we just briefly talk about the rule and then get into the more granular part of the rule. So the final rule, in a nutshell, deals with untimeliness of reporting, right? So CMS had all of these other things that it was going to include. It was going to include errors. It was going to include different other aspects of reporting, but it came out with just timeliness and timeliness of reporting that ORM acceptance and timeliness of reporting TPOC. So CMS said, listen, they talked about this final rule forever. We got the proposed rule. It was fits and starts for many years, and everybody thought, oh, it's not coming. Well, now it's here. It's now a final rule, and starting October of 2024, October 10th, 2024, they're going to look at cases from that frame on, right? So anything you're doing now is kind of a good time to get ready for it. But starting in October of 2024, those are the cases that CMS can look at to see if you reported ORM timely and to see if you reported TPOC timely, okay? They're not going to look back. They say it's not prospective, they're going to look forward. So one of the things that Danny and I talked about when we started this presentation is, yeah, the rules are so impactful. Reporting timely is really, really important. It affects a lot of things, but reporting in general, just aside from civil monetary penalties, can impact so many things, including the beneficiary and including the conditional liens that you do. So Danny, you had a story, and I think when we get into these subjects of the reporting, I think this really hits it home. And if you could share that with everybody about how it impacts people.
Yeah, just as a precursor to it, you know, the old phrase GIGO, right? Garbage in, garbage out. So it's essential that the information that you have is good information, so that when it goes out, it is received as good information. So I have a friend of a friend who, she's 70 years old. She was walking in her house and tripped over a slipper, fell, and she broke her femur. She got to the hospital. She's obviously a Medicare recipient, and she got to the hospital. They treated her. And then when it was time for her to be released and into a rehab facility, which was essential for her recovery, Medicare denied her rehab because she had had a claim 10 years earlier that involved the dog bite. And that dog bite was not on her femur that was broken, but there was a dog bite claim, and because it wasn't coded correctly, Medicare looked at the information, denied the rehab, which she went home without doing rehab, and since then it has severely set her back in her recovery process. If she'd been able to go to the rehab facility for a week to do the physical therapy that they do and to get work hardening or home hardening, whatever you want to call it, the treatment that she needed, she'd be well ahead of where she is today. And it took 3 to 4 weeks for them to clear up her record so that they would then allow it. And by the time they did that, it was too late to go into the rehab program.
And you know, I think that really says a lot, because we are seeing that, and I know you're seeing that. I know other insurers, self-insureds are seeing that, where they're getting calls from beneficiaries saying, wait, something was reported incorrectly. That's what Medicare is telling me, and it's impacting my care. I can't get care. I can't get medication. I can't get, you know, X, Y, and Z. And the problem with that is, obviously, you know, it can be very harmful, especially in that case, you know, someone with a femur injury, but someone who maybe needs, you know, real life care. Medicare says that it will pay, but we see those instances where we're getting those calls. So reporting has consequences that are even beyond the penalties. And I think as plaintiffs counsel, applicants counsel, claimants counsel, depending where you sit in the world, as they get savvier, about this, they're probably you're gonna see more and more pushback perhaps on, failing to report properly for these individuals, especially in a case where it impacts a claimant so dramatically that, their care for the rest of their life has issues. So, okay, so let's go into the query. So the query, you're not going to get penalties for not querying correctly, right? However, you need the query because you need to make sure that you're reporting on Medicare beneficiaries. So you have to query. If an individual is not queried and they are a Medicare beneficiary and you don't determine it, it can impact penalties, meaning that if you fail to report on somebody who's a Medicare beneficiary because you didn't identify them as a Medicare beneficiary and you didn't report ORM even though you're responsible for medical, that could be a situation where you have a penalty. Also, it's important to query because you need to decide if this individual is a Medicare beneficiary to determine where you are in the future medical aspect of your claim. So it can have repercussions in other areas. And CMS updated the query to include information on Medicare plans. So CMS used to come back and say, listen, you are a Medicare beneficiary, yes or no. And now they come back and say, if you have the software to do it, they come back and say, not only are you a Medicare beneficiary, but within the last 3 years, you were on a Medicare Advantage plan and the name of that plan, or you were on traditional Medicare. So it lets you know so you can go and put those lien holders on notice of that. So the query is really important. Okay, we can go to that next slide. An ORM, and this is where we're seeing, again, this is where the penalties come in, right? With reporting ORM within a year, right? You've got to report ORM within a year if you're responsible for it. So CMS wants to know when you're responsible for medicals on the claim. And they came out last year and they said, listen, we're going to give you a little bit more of some definition on ORM. And so ORM now, it used to be that you'd have to report immediately, and sometimes you were reporting things for body parts that maybe didn't flesh out as really being part of the claim or were too expansive. So CMS said that basically you can look and see what that medical treatment is, if there's a report or what have you, and really flesh that out and give us the actual codes that you're reporting along with ORM. So if you have a denied claim, you're never reporting ORM. You don't have to, it's a denied claim. But if you've accepted medical on the claim and you're reporting those diagnosis codes, you want to tell CMS that you're responsible. And what that impacts is not only the beneficiary, like we saw in Danny's example, but it also impacts conditional payments because if you're reporting ORM and you're not responsible for medical, CMS is thinking that you are, and you don't want them to think that and have you be responsible for some types of lien. And obviously for civil monetary penalties, it impacts civil monetary penalties. So ORM is very important. Okay, we're going to go to the ICD codes. And ICD coding, and Danny, like you said with the dog bite situation, ICD coding is really important because if you put in the wrong codes, you're telling CMS that you're responsible for things that you may not be responsible for, right? Or if you leave off things, then you are giving misinformation to CMS. So so I'm not able to hear you right now, Danny, but maybe you can work on that. We've been doing pre-sessions here, and sometimes we have a little technical glitch. So as soon as I can hear you, Danny, please step in. Not yet. Not yet. So I'll continue while we wait for Danny to get on. So with the ICD reporting, let me just tell you, if you have 15 ICD codes on your claim, you're probably reporting too many unless it's a really complex, a very catastrophic claim. You should be only looking at those codes that are injury related, right? Don't look at the doctor's notes and put in everything that could be a comorbid condition, pre-existing condition, unrelated body parts that you've denied. You don't want to do that. So you want to make sure you're coding correctly, because it does impact that Medicare beneficiary if you're coding incorrectly. And I know Danny's going to be able to pop on here soon with some more insight. He's going to continue playing with his mouth because we can't hear him yet. No, not yet. Okay, so we're going to go into TPOC. Okay, so we said with respect to the Section 111 penalties, TPOC is that other area of penalty, right? So what does that mean? You've got to report TPOC timely. So you've got to report that settlement or judgment timely, right? And CMS, when it comes to that settlement, they want to know when it happened, because that starts the clock, right? So when you stops the clock, I should say, when you tell CMS that you're responsible for medical, that starts the clock. When you tell them that you settled the case, that ends the clock, right? If you have an accepted claim. And CMS says that with respect to TPOC, you have to tell us when the settlement occurred. If you have a settlement agreement, you should always have a settlement agreement. Or if it has to be approved by the court, you have to tell us when that court approval was. So you want to make sure you get that in your system as soon as possible, and that you get that TPOC in there as soon as possible. Again, it impacts the beneficiary when you tell them you're no longer responsible for medical because you've settled the medical portion of the claim. And just an FYI, with respect to TPOC, one of the things that we see most often is that people are reporting settlement when they've just settled the indemnity. So make sure you've settled the medical with that. And the other thing that you're reporting is the TPOC amount, and make sure that you put the correct amount. It's everything within the four corners of that document. It is not just the amount of the MSA. It is not just what the claimant receives. It is not just the lien you paid for. It's not the subrogation that you've waived. It's not just that. It's all of those things. So if you have a case where you've waived subrogation for $100,000, the MSA is $100,000, and you're going to pay for future wage loss of $100,000, that's a $300,000 settlement. If you have an annuity, you're going to do the payout of the annuity and not your costs. So make sure that when you're reporting TPOC, you have all of that in there. And I'm gonna see if we can hear Danny yet. Not yet. Not yet. Okay, reporting errors. And we want to talk about reporting errors with respect to civil monetary penalties as well, because CMS has said, listen, you have to report ORM timely, you have to report TPOC timely, but in addition to that, we have to be able to accept it. So let's say I go out and I report ORM to CMS, but my file that I'm reporting it on has all of these errors and CMS can't look at it. You may have reported to CMS ORM, but if they haven't accepted as technically correct, they could not be looking at it, and you could still be subject to penalties if those corrections are not made within that 1 year period. So you have to be looking at what has been reported. And Danny, I wish I could hear you because you had something good to talk about with this. I know. And Diane, I don't know if on your end you can help Danny out a little bit, but one of the, I think I'm not sure if I'm hearing him yet, but no. One of the things that Danny and I discussed about this is that internally they review those errors, and they review if they have errors in their reporting before it goes to CMS, right? and try to correct that, which is really, really important to do. You want to make sure you prevent as many errors going from CMS as you can. So someone, and Danny, I know you had said that you monitor all of that. You monitor what's reported for ORM and TPOC, and you monitor, yep, you monitor all of that, which is a great practice, is what you want to do. You want somebody to be looking at those errors too. And we talked about also having a partner who's looking at those errors as well, right? So a reporting partner. And this is really important because if you, every quarter, if you're reporting quarterly, right, and you get a list of a response back from CMS, right, and you're just assuming, okay, I've reported to CMS, I'm getting a response back. Someone should be looking at that. And ideally, that should be you, and that should be the reporting agent that you're utilizing. Because your reporting agent should be saying, hey, wait a minute, there's some issues here. There's the TIN is not correct. It's preventing the reporting. We're seeing a lot of ICD issues with reporting ICD-9 and ICD-10 on the same claim. You can't do that. You got to use one or the other. You should be seeing that. It should be transparent, because you need a second set of eyes on that can say, here, there's some red flags here. Things aren't going through. So someone should be looking at that. Danny has a great practice in place to look at those things. It's really very, very important, because those errors, you've got to monitor those errors just as much as you have to make sure that the claims are going through. Nothing yet. Keep playing with that, Danny. I know it's really frustrating, because I know you guys want to hear from Danny more than me, because he's done this day in and day out. And the good thing is that we did have these discussions, and that's one of the things that we discussed when it came to these penalties. You know, what your process is, what your procedure, and having a unit, and Danny was saying that he doesn't have a total unit to do that. He's the one looking at all of that. And so that's why it's good to have somebody who you partner with who's also looking at those errors as well. Okay.
Danny, can you log off and then maybe log back on? Or go to audio and see if you can switch from computer audio to phone audio. Go ahead, Bridget. I just wanted to get some messaging to Danny. Thank you.
Yep, absolutely. So hopefully that will work. So let's go into the penalties themselves now. So we've kind of talked about how Section 111 in general, the TPOC, the ORM, the ICD coding, the errors, the query process can impact your total exposure to CMS, including the penalties, can impact the beneficiary, and can impact your conditional payment. So now we're going to talk about the penalties themselves and dig in a little bit more. So CMS has said that as of October 10th, 2024, that's when they're looking at all of those cases. That doesn't mean they're going to impose penalties. The first penalty is going to be imposed on that date. It means that they're going to start looking at cases beginning that date, and penalties for failure to report will be a year after that, so in 2025. The penalties, as I said, are only for untimely reporting, and only untimely reporting of ORM acceptance and TPOC. And with respect to that, they're going to take, Danny's going to call in. Okay. They're going to take an audit approach to that. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more, meaning they're not going to look at every RRE's quarterly reporting, which is really, really, really good news, right? Oh, we can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Well, I'm on my cell phone. I figured out how to dial in on cell phone, so now I can contribute. Woo, thank you.
Okay, great. So you had some things that you were going to talk about with respect to how you look at some of your settlements and what have you.
Well, I was going to say that the claim system that we use, and there are several of them out there that are different, right? That it has an ability to look at CMS 111 errors and notify us if there's a transmission that was off or an error that was reported, and then we could go in based on that report and fix that. It's essential, like if you do a settlement and you have open future medical, it's essential that the right ICD-10 codes are listed. And if you've accepted a claim but denied certain body parts, you need to make sure that you've denied those body parts, so that the recording is such that if down the road there's treatment and we don't deny those body parts, or we don't issue the denial, or we don't enter the information in the claim system, then they can come back and ask us for contribution for things that we shouldn't be paying for.
And we see that, right, Danny, with those conditional payments. And CMS says, listen, we make mistakes on conditional payments anyway. But if you even tell us that there's other body parts, we're going to include them, right? They're not going to knock on your door and say, you guys, I don't think this involves the right leg. I think you're wrong, right? So you're seeing that with conditional payments as well. They can be inflated because of that, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
So that's those, that's really important, that to be able to monitor that, to have a system that lets you see the errors before it goes to CMS, and then try and correct them as well within your system, and making sure the people that use the system understand that. We're going to talk about that as well. Okay, so the other part of the process is that there's going to be an appeals process for these penalties. There's a 5-year statute of limitations, which we're going to talk about, some safe harbors, and a tiered approach to penalties. So we'll talk about all of that. We did talk about the prospective nature as well. So we can go to that next slide, Shannon. And we talked about this with the untimely reporting, that CMS has said that they don't want to punish people. They want to motivate them to report correctly, right? They know people that RREs are not trying to be dishonest. They are trying their best to report, but they want to make sure that everyone's reporting in a timely nature, and that they're reporting that ORM and that TPOC correctly. Now, so let's get into this.
Correct. So the government says they want to encourage us to report correctly, and they don't want it to be a negative experience. And yet they're motivating us with these massive penalties that they're hanging over us. Instead of saying, hey, good job, you did a good job on that one, which is, the way I get motivated. They say, yeah, here's how we're going to motivate you. We're going to motivate you with a spanking, a hard spanking if you don't do it right.
And tough love, right? That tough love, right?
Tough love. Yeah.
But the other part of it is it could have been worse. It really could have been worse. So, but I agree with you. It is a large amount of money, and so with respect to that, why TPOC? Why ORM? Well, ORM tells CMS when you're responsible for medical, and TPOC tells CMS when you've closed out medical, and that's the window, right? So it's from the date of injury to the date all of that is done. Your responsibility for medical ends either through ORM termination or TPOC. So they want to know those dates. That's why it's so important. They want to know when you start being responsible, and they want to know when you end being responsible. Okay, we can go to that next slide. And we talked about being perspective only. So we get this question a lot. Well, I have cases from 2010, and they closed out, and is CMS going to go and look at 2010 cases? According to this final rule, according to everything CMS has said, they're not going to look retroactively. It's going to be prospective. They're going to start that time clock beginning October 10th, 2024. It's not going to be before that, cases before that. Does that mean that you're off the hook for any of those cases? No, because we've told you that essentially those cases can still impact your conditional payments. It can still impact Medicare beneficiaries. You want to make sure you're reporting those cases correctly. It's just with respect to CMS doing that audit, that's where they're going to start looking from that October date onward. Okay, And then let's talk about the tiered approach, right? So CMS has said, listen, we're not going to fine you the $1,000 a day per day immediately, right? We're gonna take a tiered approach to this. So if you are late in reporting ORM or TPOC, more than 1 year, but less than 2 years, it's $250 per day for every day that you should have reported correctly per claim, right? If it's more than 2 years, but less than 3 years after the date it should have been reported, that's the key. It should have been reported. It's $500 per day, per claim, okay? For every day it should have been reported. If it's 3 years or more after it was required to be reported, meaning you should have reported TPOC 3 years prior or more prior than the date you reported it, it's $1,000 per day. Now, CMS has said the total amount for any one instance for non-compliance that it will charge will be no greater than $365,000, but that is adjusted with inflation. That is adjusted with inflation. So again, we're talking about very steep penalties. Okay, let's go into that next slide with the notice process, okay? So CMS did say that, listen, we're gonna give you some pre-notice if there's a potential issue here. It's informal, and there's an opportunity for you to present evidence to us about what we're looking at here, okay? You can respond to us and tell us what the mitigating factors, if there are mitigating factors regarding your claim, right? So documentation is going to be really, really important, right? In anything you do with CMS, in anything you do with a Medicare beneficiary, you want to document. But it also might be an opportunity, if something goes awry, to prevent those mitigating factors to CMS. Now, if there was a glitch in your system, unless there was a glitch in CMS's system, they're not really going to consider that. And they haven't gone over what all of those mitigating factors are. It kind of it depends. We can't tell you everything. We're going to look at the case. But they do give you that pre-notice ability to respond before there's anything formal that goes out. And then, we can go that next slide. They go into that formal process, that formal appeals process, right? And in the formal appeals process, that's when basically you're going to get written notice at the time the penalty is proposed. You can request a hearing before an ALJ within 60 calendar days of receipt. You can appeal the ALJ's decision, or it becomes binding. So much like we see with the conditional payments, there is going to be a formal appeals process. Now, at first they said that had to be done by a lawyer. In the final rule, they didn't really say all of that. So we'll see how that fleshes out. But at least there's some opportunity to appeal. And you know, the process, and Danny, you've probably seen this with conditional payments, that can be a long process, right?
Yep, definitely. And the thought that I had while you were talking about this is when is the easiest way to fix something? When is the easiest time to fix something? And the answer is before it's broken.
Yeah.
In other words, if you're putting in the right, if you get an early practice of putting in the right information in the right fields, then you don't have to worry about it, because you know that your reporting is accurate. I like the fact that they give us time to fix it, that they give us time to appeal if we have to, if we need to, and but the easiest way to solve a problem is to get it when it's really early. That's what the old phrase, nip it in the bud. If you don't want a tree to grow out of whack, then you trim it. You trim those branches before they get too big. And so that's the easiest way to fix this situation, make sure that we're in compliance, is by practicing, correct principles right from the beginning, and enter the information as you go and as it occurs.
And that's really the way to do it. You don't want to be in that situation, right? Which is what you're saying. You don't want to take advantage of the appeals process. You don't want to get there to begin with, right?
Correct.
And so that's absolutely true. It starts just like a claim, right? A claim starts the moment it's reported. That's when you assess your liability at that point, right? You describe the injury, you accept what you're going to accept, you pay for what you're going to pay, and if you don't do it right to begin with, the consequences are going to be later. It's really just like this, right?
Right. It's exactly the same thing. You do your investigation, you accept you accept what needs to be accepted, you deny what needs to be denied. You're upfront. You're timely in your payments. You're timely in your notices, and then you don't have a problem. It's when you get away from that these things can get out of hand, and that you have a problem.
Exactly. Okay, so then the next slide. So best practices for avoiding exposure. But before we get into that, the one thing I do want to say about, before we get into the best practices, I do want to go into a few other things about the penalty. And one of the things I want to go into about the penalty is the safe harbor. It's not on the slide. We're going to talk, it's on the first slide that we talked about with all the areas of the penalties. The safe harbor provisions, I want to stress this to everybody. Okay, so CMS says, listen, there are going to be some cases, and this really comes to mind for me in liability cases. There are going to be some cases where you're not going to be able to get the information you need to report, right? A claimant's or a plaintiff is not going to give you that information. So if you go to get that information and you document that you've gone through it, and it's got to be 3 times, right? You've got to do it 3 times, unless the claimant tells you when you reach out to the claimant or counsel that they're not going to cooperate with you. You have to keep that documentation. Then that's a safe harbor for you. So say, for example, a liability case, and this is routinely liability cases. They don't want to give out their social security number. I think comp, Danny, you get more of the social security information right up front.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And with liability, it's a little bit different, because at that point, you've denied everything. You're not getting benefits from the liability insurer. Everything's in dispute. You're in litigation, or you're in mediation, or you're about to file something. So at that point, maybe you don't want to give your social security number, and people don't like giving their social security numbers out, especially nowadays, right? And so if you don't have a social security number, or at least part of a social security number, you can't report to CMS. But you have to document it. So CMS says, listen, if you document it, you reach out 3 times to the claimant, 2 in writing and 1 by other means, and you document that, then we're gonna exempt you if later we audit you and we find out that individual is a Medicare beneficiary and you should have reported TPOC. Now, a question that we always get is, well, how can I explain to claimant or to plaintiff that we need the social security number? Medicare has a form letter that you can utilize on their site that says the reason why they need it. But just make sure you have a process in place for documenting that, especially now in light of the civil monetary penalty. So I did want to report that.
I just want to rubber stamp that, right? We have a saying that if it isn't documented, it didn't happen.
That's right.
And so document your attempts, and then you're okay. As long as you've got it documented, you're covered, you're protected.
Yep, and honestly, exactly, especially with the federal government, right? With the federal government. So okay, so let's go. And the statute of limitations is the only other part, and that's a 5-year statute of limitations. But it's really based on when Medicare knew and not when they should have known. And it's different from the 3 years that we see with the conditional payments. They picked the 5 years. They had a rationale for it. I do still think it should have been 3 years, but it is 5 years. So probably not a lot of cases are going to be able to utilize that statute of limitations defense, but it is out there, so we bring that up. Okay, let's talk about best practices for avoiding penalties and in your Section 111 reporting process. Okay, so be prepared. And Danny, you mentioned this, right? Be prepared. Be prepared. Be comfortable in your reporting process. Know how it's handled, right? And one of the things that we see sometimes is that people don't know how their reporting is done. They know we have somebody who reports for us. We get responses from CMS. We're reporting. It's not enough just to know that, right? Somebody should be looking into what's going on. And Danny, you do that. And I talked all about that when you were trying to talk.
When I was trying to talk. Well, I like the second point, consider an audit, whether it be internal, if you have an internal audit department, maybe this is something you could focus them on, or we're in the process of having that done by an outside vendor. And part of that is to determine whether or not our system has the right information in it, and then correct that information before October of this year. So I highly recommend that audit process.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you, because you don't know what you don't know, right? And CMS is not going to tell you if you reported ORM correctly. They're not going to tell you with respect to if you should have reported it or not. They're not going to tell you that date you terminated ORM was incorrect. If it's incorrect, they're not going to know that. They're not going to tell you, hey, you reported the wrong TPOC amount. So the only way you're going to do that is with an audit, and having someone from the outside look at that. I think it's important because it's another set of eyes. So it's definitely something to consider now, and then building them in, right? Do a yearly audit and see if you are continuing to get better. Danny, you said the adjusters are the ones for you that put in the information regarding Section 111, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that the more you do it, it's just like anything. The easier it is, and the more of a habit it becomes in the claim reporting and claim handling process. Yeah,
and one thing's with the adjusters too, there's the claim hat and then there's the reporting hat, and sometimes they're different. And so having training for your adjusters, the people, if they're not adjusters, if it's a team that's putting in the information, whoever's doing the reporting, training them on what it is in a way that makes sense, right? Training them on we're still on the best practices, Shannon. So training them on the.
Yeah, I just moved ahead to this one because we're talking about training. So.
Oh, we're talking about training.
We're also running out of time here, but can you go back to that original, or the best practices slide, please? Okay, so look at the bottom one, understanding the penalties. We've done. I think we've pretty clearly outlined what they are. And I just wanted to make one more mention of this. If they can find a way to defer cost from the Medicare system out to an outside source, they're going to do that. We're all aware of the budgeting issues that are associated with Medicare and the continual increase in costs. So this is one of their ways of looking to defer that cost from them, from the government to the private sector, so that the care is provided or paid for that it needs to be done. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. Yeah, they want to defer those costs where they think they should be, which is with the responsible party, which is absolutely true. And the other thing I think with respect to audits, I think we need to mention too, with the penalties, it's an audit program. So again, and we talked about not every RRE is going to be every quarter get audited by CMS. It's a random sample, and it's based on 250 claims per quarter divided up by group health plans and non-group health plans. So there's a chance that you may not get audited for years. You may get audited. It could be just your audited ORM, but it's still exposure out there. Okay.
It's a lottery.
It's a lottery, the Hunger Games, the lottery. Okay, so the other thing we just wanted to tell you real quick is that we're not done with the penalties. CMS is also expanding TPOC to include the workers' compensation Medicare set aside amount. And Danny, you and I talked about this. You just report it, right? You're just reporting the amount to CMS of the Medicare set aside.
If you get an MSA, and we use the MSA as a tool to settle a claim, you got to make sure you're documenting it correctly, and that you include language that says, well, in this future medical award, this goes towards your future medical purchases, right? And we have a document in our settlement process that explains that, and that the claimant and his attorney sign when we do settle a claim.
Yeah, and I think that's, oh, go on.
Yeah, we're running out of time. We need to go to the question and answer. What else do we need to wrap up with here?
Yeah, the question. Let's go to those questions next. Do we have any, Shannon?
It looks like we did get a question on ICD coding. Where can you find a listing of the ICD coding, or is there a list?
So that's a great question. And if you go into the reporting portal, the Medicare site, and you go into references, there is a drop-down menu for accepted ICD-9 codes and accepted ICD-10 codes. And you kind of got to go through that laboriously and look at all of those. And believe me, I've seen a lot of crazy codes out there, but that's where you're going to get the most up-to-date codes.
Some claim systems have them built into the claim system, so you can do a drop down, type in a body part, then it gives you a list of. And I don't think ICD-9 are accepted anymore, are they?
They are if the case is before October of 2015, the injury is before October of 2015. Right. And Danny, you bring up a good point. You can't commingle. If you started with ICD-9, you either have to change all over to ICD-10 or keep those ICD-9, right? But after October 2015, it's all ICD-10. And ICD-10 are better codes because they're more specific to the body parts. So they're actually
But they're longer. They're longer, and they take a couple more clicks on the keyboard to enter.
That's true.
I'd also like to offer up that at macropro.com, we have those available for anybody with the username and password. So you can use them there. We are up against time, but I think we're good. So if you guys had some last comments you'd like to make, that would be fantastic, or a point that you'd like to make. It's a very important topic, and there's a lot to cover. And Danny, we know that you've had some computer problems, so if you would like to impart some more knowledge, we'd be happy to hear it.
Oh, I got lots of it, but we don't have enough time. But I just want to, just one thing, right? Remember GIGO, garbage in, garbage out.
That's really
If you're
good.
putting stuff in just to fill a space, it's going to come back and bite you on the butt later on. So it's always best to be accurate in your initial. I learned this lesson the hard way when I was a kid. My dad made me mow the lawn. I went out and I thought I mowed the lawn. He came back, he looked at it, he said, "No, do it again." And so I go, "What do you mean do it again?" He says, "You missed spots." So I went out and I did it again. And it took me 4 times. That night, I finished mowing the lawn at 10 o'clock at night before I had gotten it right. And I can't say that I was perfect lawnmower after that, but I made sure that I didn't leave lots of grass in the middle of the lawn so that my dad could see it and make me go out and do it again. So if a job is worth doing, it's worth doing right the first time, and that's just, that flows over into what we do in claims and insurance. Do it right the first time, set it up right the first time, and then you don't have to worry about it ever again.
Hey, we do have a question somebody came in with at the end, and it says they would like a little more explanation on the TPOC amounts.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So, and that's a great question. So TPOC amounts include all of the consideration paid on the claim. Okay, so I'm gonna talk about that a little more specifically. So in your settlement document, you should be outlining all of the payments you're going to make for that settlement, right? For that settlement. So it's going to include attorney's fees. It's going to include costs. It's going to include the amount that you pay, the amounts that you pay the claimant, right? It's going to include any Medicare set aside. If you have an annuity that you're paying, it's not the amount that you pay for the annuity, it's the payout amount that the claimant actually receives, or the plaintiff, right? The tricky one as well is if it's a subrogation lien. So let's say you have a workers' compensation case and a liability claim, underlying work comp and a liability. And let's say as part of the work comp, you say, we're going to waive our subrogation of $100,000 and we're settling for zero. You're not settling for zero. CMS wants to know the amount of subrogation that you waived. So it's all of that consideration. So we've seen people who just report the amount of the MSA. Nope. Or they just report the amount the claimant receives after attorney's fees. No, it's everything in the four corners of the document. And that's why settlement, really transparent settlements are important, where you outline the body parts, you outline what's being paid to whom and how much. And again, if it's not a medical settlement, you don't have to report it to CMS. You have to close out medical.
Yeah, and it also includes the information on the applicant attorney and their phone number. And that's part of in our claim system, that's part of the CMS, the Section 111 reporting, so that they can ask the attorney so you got this much, and it's all part of that. Yeah.
They can verify it. Yeah.
Somebody wanted to know if they can get a link or a letter to get Social Security numbers.
Oh, from the letter from CMS, yep. Either Diane, would I provide that to you as a follow-up, or can you give me that individual's information and I can get that to them?
Information, and then you can send them. That'd be great.
Great. Sure.
So I want to thank Bridget and Danny. You did an outstanding job, especially given that there were some technical difficulties. So you did a great job working through that. I want to remind everybody that MacroPro, we do have a Medicare verification program. So if you need to get Social Security numbers verified, we're happy to help you with that as well. It's just an extra product or service that we provide, because a lot of times we know companies like Bridget's are really, really busy and aren't able to get to everything at one time. So that's available to you.
Just one other thought about the Social Security. It's not our job to prove that it's an accurate Social Security number, but we do need to verify, whether or not the claimant is Medicare eligible, and they may not be Medicare eligible if they haven't been paying into the program or they're not qualified for that. So when you're settling a claim or in the process of that, verify whether or not they're Medicare eligible and document the fact. And that way down the road, if whoever's using the wrong Social Security number, there becomes an issue with, hey, this guy had a claim. No, not that. That's that we have documented that information correctly in the file.
That's a good point.
Excellent. And then just as a reminder that if you would like to get a discount at the EWC, go onto their website. And Deborah, what coupon code would they use for that?
They would use EWC for their coupon code, and they would go to ewcconference.com. Also, I had in the last 24 hours 2 people whose firewalls would not let them go to the EWC website. So you can email me at info@events, and we're happy to help you register, and then we'll just send you an invoice to pay with your company credit card.
All right. Well, we have 2 other
from an
webinars
outside
now.
source or an unpaid endorsement. The EWC is a great conference.
Thank you. We work really hard at that.
Thank you very much. All right. We have 2 other conferences next week. So please check out the macropro.com website for those classes, as well as we have in-person 6-hour CEU conferences that are free also for examiners. Check our website to see if one is in your area. Until the next time, thank you again, Bridget, Danny, and Deborah. Have a great day, everybody. Bye-bye now.
Thank you. Thank you, ladies. Thank you, Danny. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.